Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, and for this video, some special Crimson Desert news drops. As we expected, the embargo did lift today for the press and creators who got to play some of the game early at a preview event. That event, the access, was split up into two sections though. The first section was 4 hours of uninterrupted free play in what seemed to be the full game. So this should lead to a lot of new information because people went off in different directions, obviously. The section started from the beginning of the game though, the opening credits, and from there they could do whatever they wanted. I expected them to be under specific restrictions, like a special version of the game, or don't go certain places, or don't look at certain menus, but with none of that in place, it was just the first 4 hours and whatever you wanted to do in that time. Apparently the furthest anyone made it in that opening was the very start of Chapter 3, with the last boss of Chapter 2 apparently being a boss called Kalok the Hornsplitter. Most people at the previews did not reach that boss fight. So that's an incredibly good sign, but there are some restrictions in what we'll see from that. Cut up and edited down versions of the 4 hours, not just like 4 hours, here you go, watch the 4 hours. Now outside of that, they were given a small rest to sort of reset and eat, and then did a second private section. So about 2 hours of play where they're on a special save at a starting point with a lot more progression behind it, more towards the end game. They were not allowed to capture footage of that, but they were allowed to talk a little bit about it. And I heard claims that those endgame saves were about 60 to 80 hours of playtime in. But it was pretty spoiler filled with different conversations during cinematics that we definitely don't want to hear too early. So overall, I think the way they've done this preview is good. I've watched a lot of people talk about their experience and show off a lot of different gameplay, so I just want to highlight some of the most important topics and cool details that I learned from watching all of that. First up, a major question people have is performance, so let's start with that. The game is running on its own engine, right? The Black Space engine. There's been talk about how they aren't using upscaling, which is something you see a lot with Unreal Engine 5, which has a lot of issues in performance anyway. Their preview was on PC, not console, and they were using apparently the same setup that Digital Foundry did for their special early sort of preview for the Black Space engine, which overall was very positive. Luke Stevens was talking about how the rigs were 9700 XTs, with 32GB of RAM, running on high or ultra, or with most of the features on maximum. They were playing on ultra wide monitors though, which is why all the footage generally is like stretched or has black bars. But very happily, their average FPS was 80 or higher, never ever dropping below that, never stuttering, even in crazy locations like cities or up in the sky with extreme draw distances, which is very impressive. But obviously a lot of people are concerned and wondering about, well, the situation with the console version of performance. Right now, the only thing we have to go on is the creator Game Tong, who maybe had a different preview event where they were able to play it on PlayStation 5. And they said this, that the game was running consistently about 40 to 45 FPS on a base PlayStation 5 on quality mode. So what would it run on performance mode? Higher than that. And you would expect a minimum 60 FPS and above. But we simply need more information on this topic. There were some hiccups though, it wasn't perfect. In terms of gameplay, we heard about various bugs that occurred, specifically in the Abyss puzzle sections, where certain things would break, where they tried to like access something, use a button, and then it wouldn't register as being used. But these types of bugs seem to just require a reload, and that resolved them. So definitely something for them to tweak before launch, hopefully. Performance-wise, almost everyone had that same smooth gameplay experience, but a couple people at the event did experience some crashes, which at least sounds like a minority. The team told these people that these crashes were a result of a known GPU driver issue with this pre-release version, which will not be an issue at launch when they have official drivers to work with. That is definitely a claim I wouldn't bank your life savings on, but hopefully they're right. But in regards to performance, I think that's pretty impressive. It seems the majority had a pretty happy performance experience. One cool detail I heard was one dev telling a player to stop what they're doing while they're up in the abyss and look around, and they were pointing out locations where a certain bit of a trailer was shot, where a boss battle is, where certain events happen. The world is designed for you to see it from a massive distance, to be able to see something physically in some place and go over to it because there's a draw there, there's something waiting for you. So let's move into the Sandbox section. The game started at the beginning of the game. The Greymane faction basically dissolved, broken up, Cliff, your main character, prominent figure in the Greymanes, survived that event, as well as a few other Greymanes did. Your goal is to sort of regroup and rebuild the faction, get revenge. So, there was a lot of encouragement to go find those other Greymanes. You might hear a rumor or be told about a location of a Greymane. This would encourage you to go to a specific region or specific place within the region, emphasizing the gameplay is about the adventure, what's out there and what you can do, more than the story being like a centerpiece of why you're doing what you're doing. More of a vehicle to get you to fun locations. And the whole idea of the Greymanes being dotted around the world is to encourage you to go to specific places primarily. The NPCs themselves were really cool to look at. The level of detail with the cinematic camera shots, the motion capture for all the NPCs is crazy. A bunch of people talked about this specific side quest where a man's on a roof and sort of slips and rolls down it. Each character here is fully acted out, even though it's essentially a tiny event that's barely relevant in the world. All of it's voice acted properly and really giving it effort, which is really impressive. One example was Luke Stevens talking about, well, he went up to two NPCs and was talking to them, and they commented on how horrible Cliff smells because he specifically had done a different quest line before that, interacting with some dead cows. So it makes me wonder, what NPCs would have unique lines for the condition that Cliff's currently in? Was it just that case? Or is it something that they've planned out for many different NPCs? It's a cool idea. Ultimately, it calls out the level of attention to detail, all the context considerations, with some fun and interesting writing behind it, which is a good sign. I saw a load of unique mechanics talked about, or, just shown on screen, so let's talk about them. One great example was light reflection, which is basically something we've seen a load of times in gameplay trailers and clips, where you use it to reveal locations. Like you hold up your sword and reflect the light, and that causes abyss fragments nearby to reflect the light, and that gives you an objective to go to, a point of interest. But we see it used in a specific puzzle where that mechanic's introduced, sort of generating heat into a specific spot by reflecting the light. This then came up later at a tower surrounded in ivy which was blocking a door, or preventing you climbing it. So you could just use an arrow that you light at a brazier that's right there at the tower, kind of the dev intended thing to do, to burn the ivy. But someone in the session didn't have any arrows, so a dev was just like, oh, just use light reflection then. Generate heat into the ivy, burning it in a completely different way, which would then allow you to generate fire in a lot of places depending on the light that's available, instead of needing a convenient lit fire brazier, which is a cool idea. Much like, say, Breath of the Wild, there should be many ways to solve a problem. You just have to be creative, and you don't have to use the obvious, essentially dev-suggested solution. Another interesting detail of this sandbox then is the day and night cycle, the weather system. It's been said that it's dynamic plenty of times, right? But now that's been proven from this gameplay event. During the same situations, players were in rain or in daylight or in shadows from the sun or just at full at night. All doing the same thing, but in a bit of a different context, just to show that. It was Luke Stevens that highlighted the message system. So a unique message system exists in the game. So instead of magically getting information from a voice in your head or something, some characters want to tell you something or draw you to them or whatever it is. And so they'll send you a bird with a message, which will land on you, and then you'll have a prompt on the screen to take the message. And if you don't, the bird just sort of sits on you until you do, which is fun in itself. I saw the checkpoint system. So seemingly using the ancient abyss technology we've seen in different trailers, fast travel options. These seem to be these special pads you activate by standing on them. From then on, that's now a fast travel point, but also a checkpoint, so you can quickly go back to it if you mess up the following section. Makes sense. Another cool detail was to do with first person. I talked about this recently in an early footage that we saw. Can you use first person for combat? And the answer appears to be no. So as much as that's a shame, it was fully expected. But basically what you can do is, if you're on a PlayStation controller, there's sort of that main touchpad button. This will instantly swap your POV from third person to first person for you to look around, which is nice. We've seen in other gameplay, players change the camera to be closer over the shoulder or much further back, so there's definitely some control over it. But yeah, no first person combat with Sim. So speaking of combat, let's get into that. From all the footage, there seems to be quite a lot to say. But the core is quite straightforward. You have light and heavy attacks, so R1 light, R2 heavy, and then you can chain those into combos. Apparently you can just hold the button and it sort of automatically does that, which is nice. But each weapon has their own unique light and heavy attack combos and playstyles for their own purposes. You can pull out your bow with L2 to aim and fire, we've seen plenty of that. You can block with L1, and yes, there is like a deflection or perfect parry timing if you do it at the last moment. L3 was the force palm skill, at least in the early gameplay. The Abyss abilities seem varied and complex. I heard offhanded mention of the ability to slow time, so maybe you change what's on L3, like what's currently equipped, but what we saw a lot of was the force palm skill, which allows you to strike with great force. This costs spirit to trigger it would seem, and you can use it to push objects, operate special devices like the whole Abyss button pressing. You can enhance it to make it even stronger, probably the skill tree. And so that was the most commonly used, I guess, Abyss ability, if we're going to call it that. We'll see how it truly works though. I've also seen, say during mid-sprint, you can press L3 in to slide instead, which we saw in trailers to dodge attacks and even start grapples. Now I'm not sure how the kick and grapple system fully works, it's probably just a bind. But I want to know like the details of it, you know? What about my weight versus theirs? What character I'm currently playing? What's the restrictions on it? Because it seems really strong. I know that you can invest in it specifically via the skill tree, so it's a question for me. Other things can change the context of your attacks though, whether you're attacking from the air, what position you're in, the target you're dealing with. There's also the element imbuement system, which doesn't seem like something they were able to unlock during the opening section, so it must be a strong feature and just come later on. So mentioning special abilities, these are indeed unlocked via the skill tree, and these seem to modify what you're able to do with your weapon and setup. So one example given was the short sword. You could do R1 plus triangle to do a light special attack. Maybe you could do R2 plus triangle to do a different heavy special attack if you've unlocked it. Anyway, an example of that was the short sword, one-handed sword as a closing thrust, or with R1 and circle, you're doing like a sweep around yourself for AoE, but these aren't tied to the weapons. So in this example, we had the great sword, R1 plus circle with this kind of uppercut style swing, launching an enemy into the air. So you can definitely combo that, and maybe you could even juggle an enemy in the air with it. The flair of combat seems to come from all the different options you have and chaining them into different combos and situations. So depending on the weapon, the attacks you have, the special abilities you have, the momentum, maybe the weight, which part of an attack you're in, element imbuement, people seem pretty impressed with it, so I'm excited to try it. In regards to bosses, one detail I gleaned from preview breakdowns was on the endgame save when they were talking about in passing. A lot of players were facing this specific boss fight that gave most people an extreme challenge. It didn't sound like it had been beaten, but it had multiple phases and expected you to use a lot of tools that maybe by that point you naturally gathered and actually understood so you could actually weave into your gameplay. There were callouts to some sort of special circus boss that a player stumbled into, which was unlike any of the other publicly shown bosses we've seen so far, so it does seem like all the bosses are going to be really unique. We already knew that was going to be a big draw for the game. So the progression system isn't like default leveling, and they've been pretty clear on the idea that it's not exactly an RPG, it's a different kind of game. Ultimately, there is progression though, say through the skill tree. Each character has their own skill tree, and seemingly from the preview event, everyone just had Cliff for that first 4 hours, which makes sense. But as we knew, you'll find these Abyss artifacts and use them to unlock or enhance points of the skill tree. We get those artifacts from various sources, exploration, quests, in the Abyss, fragments that have fallen down, seemingly some bosses even have them. We did get a few shots of the skill tree from different early looks. We see 3 branches, so a blue, green and red path. From people sort of scrolling over them, I know that one of them's spirit, one of them's health, and then the blue is a third option. I'm not sure what the official name is. But anyway, we're told that these skills unlock improved jumping, traversal options, alongside, you know, combat specific options, straight up improving how much health you've got. Each path had a sort of main line to progress through to the main final node, but then each section would then branch off to the side for multiple choices or even its own short progression path, so it looks pretty solid. In terms of difficulty then, it was referenced again that there is no difficulty option. You can't play on hard or easy or whatever, it's just the game and the challenges that exist and how and when you choose to deal with them. Power comes from sources like, currently unlocked abilities and how much you enhance them, but also your equipped items that you've gained from exploration. We know that you can defeat special bosses, and then what they drop you can equip and use, and then you get special effects, like the Spectral Knight that summons an attack after you make one of yours, but newly revealed is Kaliok the Horn Splitter, right? That boss at the end of Chapter 2. His evade ability comes from his gear, which certainly looks strong for dealing with massive attacks against bigger enemies and making a bigger distance on your evade. Generally though, it's clear the game had minimal handholding throughout this experience. You can tackle a problem in many ways, and the devs might have a more obvious solution for you, but clever interactions of many kinds are encouraged. And that's a very good thing if you like sandbox style games, again Breath of the Wild comparisons. But the challenge and lack of guidance is probably going to be a problem for a lot of players who aren't willing to engage with the game at that level and pay attention. So it's going to be interesting to see this reaction, especially when it comes to healing. As confirmed from this preview, healing isn't like a magical or infinite source it would seem. At least when I heard it referenced, it was specifically food and consumables that was something you needed to have on hand. So did you purchase that earlier? Had you created that earlier? It's like managing a subsystem of the game that affects how prepared you are for whatever you're going to deal with. If you're an over-prepared player, you'll have brought good equipment and resources and maybe properly unlocked stuff. Maybe you're ready to punish a target's weakness based on the context. Maybe you just have a lot of heals more than normal. But if you go underprepared and you get smashed, I guess that's on you. But yeah, that's going to be my breakdown from the preview event information that I've gleaned from today. I'm sure there's going to be lots more learned as we really take time and look for the gameplay and see what new has been revealed. But we are now in March, it's the release month, we don't have too much longer to wait. Until then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.